Hey there, I'm going to interrupt this before the video officially starts. I just wanted to go ahead and show this certain little piece of fan art that Sek-Ai made of me looking like goddamn Wizardmon. I gotta say, this looks freaking amazing. Well, also it certainly helps that Wizardmon was one of my most favorite Digimon, but I gotta say, I'm rocking that look. There's like two versions where it's just the character, and the other one has like this starry night sky with some wisp of smoke around the bear, or those are probably just like nighttime clouds and all that. But seriously, this, it just très magnifique. Thank you. Anyway, yeah, this was made by Sek-Ai of the Discord. It looks utterly goddamn amazing. Thank you so much for this. I honest to goodness love it. And oh, shit, it's the finale of DS Irae, isn't it? On to the intro! Well, this is certainly a fantastic start. Hello there, everybody. Sabata92, aka Nightmare, and welcome back to DS Irae interview with Kaziklu Bey in what is probably going to end up being the final episode. Oh, God, you just had to remind me why Mercurius is so goddamn hated, you trash bag motherfucker. Right? Whenever we were going to have our semi-happy ending, because, well, I guess you could consider it a happy ending with Kaziklu Bey and all that good stuff, but no. With Mercurius, you're not allowed to be having a happy ending whatsoever. So, the battle with Ludwig is pretty much over, but it looks like we're definitely not done, as, this shit is certainly happening. Embracing that feeling, my craving began singing of the world, the ideal that I dreamt of. Oh, God. Please run before my love kills your ideal, before my world murders yours. Oh. What? Whoa! Okay, I don't know if anybody else here who's watching had played Shin Megami Tensei 4, but I'm getting a serious End of Days vibe from this design. Holy shit! And so before me I saw an eternal sky that dispersed the surrounding frost, in the corporeal form of a messenger.
Blue-white. It was a silver sun shining over the clear, endless heavens, as though singing audible bliss. A holy light so intense you'd think all the purity had begun painting the world in Claudia's color. The phenomena, the prayer, I recognized it all too well. This was the world she dreamt of, the manifestation of the craving she dedicated her entire being to. There was only one thing that could mean. It was far too clear. The light raining down on me burned my body. My blood boiled while my bones burst and collapsed. This was neither because of my albinism or because I was a tainted vampire. This light would burn all. It was a divine fire that would spare neither the most normal of men nor anyone of the obsidian table. All without exception would be reduced to mere ash. Not only that, but this wasn't even an attack. This world wasn't malicious. It wasn't at all intended to harm its enemies. Therefore, it showed no restraint. Its law was based on Claudia's idea that light was precious and that it burned. And there was no better proof of that than what was happening to me. Even though she became an angel, she too was burning. That was how she perceived light, and since she literally burned for its sake, the outcome was obvious. All of creation, be burned by this bliss. Feel the true heat of life through the angelic light of love. It matters not if all becomes ash.
Seriously, end of days.
Her creation figment was the complete opposite of mine. An eternal night and perpetual day. A moon that was always full and a sun that never set. A wish to be a vampire and a desire to become an angel. We both had transcendence qualities despite being hegemonies, and we both were subjected to the effects of the worlds we painted. They were simultaneously distant opposites and entirely similar. Still, there was one key difference that stood out above the rest.
Yeah, it's literally killing her.
Claudia was unable to keep her world in check. Her craving acted regardless of her will. She was being eaten. She didn't intend to activate it and thus was unable to cancel it. The flame of paradise would burn until she herself was reduced to a pile of ash.
If that's happiness, I don't want any bit of it. Although, if I can be perfectly honest, I kind of like this sort of design for like what an angelic being could possibly look like. But I will admit I also prefer the almost eldritch abomination kind of look for angels, being indecipherable in appearance and stuff like that. I do like those, rather than just, you know, they're human and they're glowing. They're an angel! I don't know. I guess I've always just kind of leaned toward monstrous designs. Or symbolic, kind of like this.
Why was this happening? I didn't know shit about the actual cause. The rose around her chest was her Irae, the core of the current phenomena. I could tell that much, but it didn't help me understand the situation whatsoever. The situational evidence suggested that it happened sometime before, during or after the events at Kachin, but I couldn't grasp the details at all. The only certain thing was the fact that Claudia was obviously an amateur, but she also had supreme talent. Despite not knowing a single bit about magic, she jumped straight to the Bria degree due to the power of her craving alone. However, the backlash made her lose control of it, blowing away her consciousness and bringing her to the brink of death. It was ridiculous, stupid, and seemed almost like a bad joke straight out of a cheap play. Like hell I was gonna accept something so fucking absurd. That rosary didn't have a single soul in it. After all, if it did, I or Beatrice would have instantly realized it. The thing was clearly empty, so the fact that this was happening could only mean that its fuel was Claudia's own soul. Was I supposed to accept that a fucking cross stole what was mine to drain? Like hell, I'd just sit there and do that. Listen, I went through a goddamn character arc. I had a goddamn rivalry. I'm taking what's mine. It was intolerable. So yeah, there's only one option for me. Can't move? Injured? Shit compatibility? Fucking excuses, all of them. I had no time for that garbage. I mustered my energy and roared as I shattered the shackles of pain and stood up. Parts of my body were covered in flame, and the carbonized bits crumbled and fell, but I didn't give two shits about any of that. As my eyes began to evaporate, I looked at Claudia, who was burning as badly as me. With her face in my eyes, I made a brief declaration. Neither of us wanted this shit. I'd go there and, just as she desired, take her before her soul wasted away. I'd embrace her. No way I'd let her escape. And now... now was the promised time. I'd admitted my feelings, so I already had all the determination I needed. Yeah, there was only one path I could take. I had to unleash the kiss in the dark gift of the mystical rose, and it didn't have to be said what I'd give for that. I'd let her have my soul. Following that declaration of mine, the hegemony of night began to swell as Helga burst into joyous laughter. Thus we began weaving my ideal, the abyssal world I sought. Where did I taste of old such rapture celestial? All thy soul, their perfections who can measure. We synchronized, and the dark spirit pressure skyrocketed as a result. As she consumed my soul, Helga chanted with rose-colored intoxication. I had been but a child before I knew you, but who am I? What fate brings me to you? Should I be unworthy to live as a knight, may death claim me here and now, for there is no abyss deep enough to rob me of this blissful memory. Okonogi were cursed objects that gained a will of their own by being doused in rivers of blood or faith. They continued to seek more souls, and they always picked and chose wielders who would provide them with sustenance. Basically, they sought people they liked, but the truth behind that wasn't just a symbiotic relationship. The soul they wanted to eat the most was that of the wielder. The dark gift Helga was a prime example of such an Okonogi. While loving me, doing all she could for me, and dedicating all she was to me, she also wanted my life so much it drove her crazy. Wither to ashes, oh my love. This too was a love of destruction. The new prayer, the chant I'd spun here, contained my feelings for Claudia, and it was proof that I'd formed a two-way connection with Helga for the very first time. We both desired to drain our beloveds to death. This very madness was the true nature of a vampire, the blood-stained flower. What has come o'er me? What has come to pass? I fain would ask her, oh why trembles all my soul? Has bitter wrong, a sinful deed been done? I gaze and see but you, feel but you. I knew full well she didn't like Claudia one bit, but I'd be having none of that shit. I'd let her drain me to make up for it. That was fair, right? Definitely not one-sided anyway. For only I know you, who perished by my love. Wither to ashes, oh my love. I'd have Claudia, Helga'd have me, and she'd go to her sanctuary. Ero's prayer was complete and wrought the miraculous night. Oh. Oh my fucking god. This is the fucking coolest thing ever! Good lord. The result was an erupting torrent of darkness that crushed the light around me. The bloodied flowers blooming around me were my very soul, the candles of my life. It was a unique manifestation of my creation figment that I'd yet to use, and probably won't ever use again. Its output was immense, but it was also pretty damn worthless in battle.
That fucking voice.
It was all because the dark gift was crazy about my taste. It was such a sweet drug to her that she even forgot her hate of Claudia. As proof, though the night we released was extremely dense, its area of effect was seriously limited. Just several meters around me. It was representative of how narrow and focused Helga's field of vision was.
Clever.
All things considered, this creation figment was a real failure. The Night of the Bloodstained Rose's true worth only showed when it drained others to feed and strengthen me, but in that moment it was turned against me. It was a night that did nothing but drain me until I was dry. It didn't heal my wounds or enhance my powers. It did everything backwards, basically making it an act of suicide. However, in this particular situation, it was a truly miraculous night. After all, the unprecedented density of its darkness was enough to decrease the light of the angel. I could move, my legs worked. I'd have no problems walking over to Claudia. If I were to launch my stakes in this situation, they'd burn up the moment they left the nightly barrier, so all I could do was walk over directly. I'd embrace her and make her wither until her life faded. All that mattered was that my soul survived long enough for me to get there. With that whisper, I began walking, dragging the dense night with me. Don't you fucking die on me, Claudia. I'll take you whole because I love you.
Yep.
Even with my scorched consciousness, I could easily understand what he was doing and its purpose. I just didn't know why this happened. Was our relationship and the final choice we'd arrived upon such a profound sin? Did God determine that it simply couldn't come to pass?
Mercurius is just casually giggling in his trash bag suit off in the distance right now, watching this unfold.
そうです。ヴィルヘルム、光を踏み越えて、私を奪って、死なせたくない、死にたくない。これは両立する気持ちだから。戦ってください。私の愛しい、私の天使を。
As if to affirm its sinfulness, my craving ignored me and rained down a deluge of light. It was as though it were creating a trial for him to overcome. It venerated his progress while obstructing his advance. It was contradictory, but that was exactly what made it two-sided. After all, Wilhelm was sacrificing his life to live on, and the craving believed that doing something similar was proof of love.
私の天使になりたいから、あなたを救うために戦いたい。
The purity of the logic was so great that it seemed almost like madness. I felt as though the heavenly light itself was telling me, this is your truth. Be aware of how sinful you are. Accept your punishment. Fall to the earth. Take what you deserve for your broken, misguided love. Thin and fading, I was completely unable to resist this, even though I knew full well that both of us would die if things continued down the current path. No one would ever arrive at their sanctuary.
Oh shit, now that I can actually see his hands, okay, all this angelic, like, sort of symbolism and all that, the piercing of his palms, that's kind of similar to the holy stigmata, although they're just with his hands, or maybe I'm just reading too much into that, but I just, for some reason, whenever I see, like, symbolism like this, and then I see the palms being pierced, my first thought is immediately, hey, is that a reference to the stigmata? I imagine it'd be too on the cheek if he had, like, a blood dripping from the middle of his forehead, you know what I mean?
He continued his advance while my angelic light didn't weaken whatsoever. In fact, it was growing stronger without limit, as though it was the salvation I'd been seeking.
Well then.
愛してます。愛しています。あなたに与えられた光の尊さを知ってください。見てください。抱いてください。奪ってください。
Interesting how the two things that love him, are both trying to kill him, but one doesn't want to, while the other is absolutely enjoying it.
ヴィルヘルム、私は今こんなにも。死んでもいいわ。一緒に死んで。
We were both heading straight toward our demise. There were two very clear reasons why Wilhelm couldn't come to me. First was compatibility, while the second was the effective range. Unfortunately, he was disadvantaged on both fronts. As Wilhelm was now, he was a true vampire, so he was weak to sunlight. It was his bane, in fact. The second problem he had was that his current night was exceptionally small. Though my light reached him, his darkness didn't reach me at all. It was basically a one-sided battle. Under normal circumstances, his night was probably wider, and it had an area of effect as great, if not greater than my day, but alas, he was unable to use it now. Though it was true that the night's darkness had become more dense, that didn't amount to much. After all, he couldn't know what was going on outside while in absolute darkness. We were both the same in that regard. I couldn't see anything outside this day I'd created. To move forward, to not lose sight of me, he absolutely had to be able to see. Therefore, he couldn't shut away all light and actually take the fatal poison, or took the fatal poison even though his soul was already being drained. With conditions so bad, he simply couldn't fulfill his goal. It was objectively impossible. The only future that awaited him were death by the burning light or death by the girl, draining him completely. Despite that, he...
This boy refuses to give up.
He didn't doubt the path he'd walked whatsoever. To him, it wasn't about whether he could. He just did it. He talked big, confident in his chances, and literally burned his life to attain his goal. It pained my heart to even look at him, but at the same time... he truly was lovely. And I didn't want to die myself. If possible, I wanted to live with him forever. I absolutely loved his foul mouth, and I would have loved to hear even more of it. He was short-tempered, violent, and generally a very bad person who wouldn't do much good. Perhaps there are many people who would be saved if he were to die. Those who died by his hands too probably wished for his death. But, oh dear, I still wanted to save him. He was a child of Noah, born in the dark, so he knew more of light than anyone else. He'd probably have rejected those words if he heard them. I can just imagine him putting on a scowl and yelling at me, calling the idea disgusting, or saying that I was misunderstanding something. In fact, perhaps he wouldn't be wrong about that. For now, anyway. In this world, at least. Then perhaps in the next world, or the one after that, the light of the rose will gain a new meaning. No. As one who knew of his life in prayer through our blood pact, I'd grown certain of that. And that was exactly why I couldn't let his precious light receive such a wasteful end. Regardless of his reasons, he came to know love, embraced affection, and fought hard even as he was wasting away. If he determined the situation to be a failure and an act of stupidity, I felt like all that would come after would collapse. I had no doubts that I lived my life seeking the light for the sake of this very moment. I'd met him, came to love him, and was loved back. I was born Metatron, the angel meant to be the foundation to further elevate the Knight of the Rose into the future. I'd finally become aware that the truth of the light I was seeking was the vast, miraculous land he would eventually wedge upon. I had to guide the possibility birthed by the bloodstained flower toward the promised bliss.
That is a very powerful line right there. I don't know why, but... Huh. I guess I don't know. I for some reason, that line just seems really strong to me.
Number 4 of the Obsidian Round Table, Wilhelm Ehrenberg, would surely go farther ahead. I had to protect him. I couldn't let him fall. I didn't want to etch onto his soul that our relationship, our history, was fraught with nothing but defeat. Even if God himself called me sinful, deemed us unworthy of rewards, and decided we needed to be punished, I would still be against it. I didn't want to hear it. I had faith that the sanctuary I sought wasn't just a circle of disappointment. There was no need to adhere to the plot of a dying god, a world about to fade. Wilhelm once heroically roared that only the weak vanished, and that there was no past that surpassed the present, and because of that, it was absolutely necessary to lead his evolved soul onto the next world. We couldn't allow ourselves to disappear as fleeting lives that simply allowed themselves to be toyed with by the olden law. I'd like to treat the potatoes he bought with care, so the preparation would probably take some time. I hoped he wouldn't see this conclusion as a defeat. His battle would continue, and I hoped he wouldn't stop moving forward and would always strive to be the best he could be. He would surpass the end of the world and beyond. I wanted to save this undying warrior who constantly struggled against fate. That manner of being was part of why I loved him, after all. I couldn't resist my craving, so I couldn't stop the light. Therefore, there was only one course of action.
先へあなたが前へ進めるように
I resolved to act it out. I tightly embraced the rosary on my chest and prepared to become a miracle for your sake, my Methuselah.
One step, then another.
Oh, slowly but surely, Wilhelm approached the angel. It was already odd enough that he was still standing, but he wasn't in a situation when he had time to care. If he did, he'd just break it and it'll be all over. As common logic dictated, brightness was stronger the closer you were to the source. The sun ravaging his body could quickly bring him to ruin, so he couldn't hesitate for even a moment. He was short on time on several fronts.
俺もっとだもっとすげえ甘えんだてめえの愛はその程度かこんな程度じゃちっとも役に立ってねえぜ俺を吸い殺したいんじゃねえのかてめえ
どうしてあなたはいつも私を感じさせるの愛しいね可愛いねそんなに待ちきれないのねもっとあなたでっきり吐き出しかしてあげる気持ちよくしてあげるからありったけを吐き出しなさい残らず絞り込んであげるから
As Helga's joyous screams resounded, the surrounding darkness grew even denser, while the flowers began to wither. It wasn't injury or mere pain anymore. Wilhelm was getting a taste of how it was to have his very existence collapse. He was akin to sugar cubes dropped into a sea of sulfuric acid. One could only theorize what would happen to someone who had their soul torn asunder. Ooh, hello. Though that had happened to the Obsidian Table's very own Tubal Cain, he had a set of unique circumstances, so it wasn't guaranteed that Wilhelm would have ended the same way. Holy shit. Damn. Look at this boy with the mask. At the very least, he'd definitely lose his self. Even if his bodily functions continued, he wouldn't be able to think and wouldn't have a hint of a will. Whether he'd gone on to die empty or become replaced by something completely different, he definitely wouldn't be the same man that he once was. He was losing parts of himself with every passing moment. The factors that made Wilhelm Ehrenberg into who he was were disappearing one by one. Yeah, you need the potatoes, goddammit! His mumble was self-deprecating, but he wasn't the least bit pessimistic about the situation. He'd chosen this himself, and it was but a part of the endless road he'd walk. Anyone who lived long would lose a thing or two, and it was his style to never look back at it. Dwelling on the past would cast a shadow over his hegemony, rendering him incapable of becoming Methuselah. He never desired to regain what he had lost, nor did he expect to have any such opportunities. Still, if those things somehow ended up on the path he walked. Because of that, he wanted to carve deep the parts of him he was losing. It wasn't so he could keep them all in his heart or something like that. After all, he'd never been sensitive enough to cry out of regret upon losing something. The thing he was carving on wasn't himself, but the world. No. In fact, he was doing it on the origin of the immense law that weighed down the world. He wanted to show how he and Claudia fought against their own fates, even if their burning souls and the parts of them that crumbled were lights that could never be restored. They had a meaning, and were a link to the future. Thus, he believed that no matter how trivial the parts he lost were, they definitely weren't lost to him for nothing. Withered to ashes, oh my love. Even if she ended up like the words suggested, she could become the foundation of a large rose. Therefore, he kept on walking. 1 step, 2 steps, he'd never stop, for it was part of him. The voice he heard coming from the angel as he approached was one he'd never forget. It wasn't the out-of-control craving talking. It had a shine dense with a crystal-clear blessing, and it was also the first and only time he ever found sunlight beautiful. Helga's fangs, having grown larger than ever before, bit into the core of his soul. She gnawed the crux of Wilhelm's being and sucked it with explosive haste. It would wither, split, burn to ashes, be hollowed out and ravaged as it became a proof of love. It was exactly the same thing Wilhelm had done to the real Helga. The dark gift cackled as it was about to shatter all that Wilhelm Ehrenberg was. But right before that happened... Oh! Oh shit, Helga got fucking wrecked! Also, I think this is legitimately one of the first times I've ever seen Wilhelm this shocked. The thing that shattered first was the Okonogi that acted as the core of the angel. Claudia's beautiful, bright prayer broke through the item's tolerable limit. That meant only one thing. I think he lost. The angel shattered. Claudia flew out of its core, covered in the glittering fragments of the rosary, and wrapped her hands around Wilhelm's neck. Their lips touched, and following that, the overflowing torrent of light became a wave that pushed the dark gift's materialized form into the horizon. Bye, Helga. Helga lost most of the power she'd absorbed and ran away, vanishing into the darkness like an exorcised evil spirit. Wilhelm was so overwhelmed by this turn of events that he couldn't even speak. After seeing off the dark gift, Claudia formed a troubled, wry smile. This expression on Wilhelm. Her tone and mannerisms were the same as always. She chided Wilhelm, acting as though her own state didn't matter at all. Claudia was generally off point and stupid, which often made Wilhelm feel irritated, exasperated, and annoyed beyond belief. And despite their grave situation, absolutely none of that had changed. Even after expiring and becoming nothing but a soul, she was still herself. The voice the man rang out was dry and withered. Wilhelm had realized what had happened. Claudia had most likely drained her own soul to save him, making the rosary shatter due to the overload. And this was the result. An Okonogi that shattered always took its wielder with it, which meant that she couldn't possibly survive much longer. Claudia had escaped his reach. He wouldn't be able to take her now. He was aware that Helga would be unusable for a while, so he had absolutely nothing he could do about the woman before him. It's like freaking Mercurius said that he ends up getting the things taken away from him.
得られなかった。なんて悲しいことは言わないで。私はあなたのかけらを抱いていくんだから。
Claudia gently embraced Wilhelm and comforted him. They were surrounded by countless dancing lights that appeared the same as stardust. They were the pieces of their souls that were robbed from them by Helga and the Rosary. They mixed, became one, and twinkled brightly.
確かに私はここであなたに奪われることができなかったけど、失敗じゃない、負けじゃない。あなたは何も失っていない。そのことだけは覚えていて。私はあなたを救えて幸せだったし。
Claudia's form faded with every second as their fragments rose up high into the distance.
決して離れ離れになるわけじゃない。一緒だから、一緒だからね。どうかお願い。ウィルヘルム。
She was mere moments away from vanishing.
泣かないで。大好きよ。
The implication that he'd shed tears made Wilhelm momentarily lose his words, then feel supreme anger. He wanted to assert that he'd never cried and never would.
待て。
He repeatedly told her to stay. He tried to cling to her, but she was out of reach.
私はあなたを抱いて良きところへ。今はまだわからなくても、きっとこれが未来を照らす光になると信じてる。生きてね。ずっと。世界が終わっても生き続けてね。私のメトシャラ。私の愛しい。
She formed her final, most sincere smile.
大切な人。ウィルヘルム。
His scream didn't reach her. His words received no response. Embracing the fragments of the rose within her heart, Claudia vanished into the light. That was the last time he ever saw her. Obviously, Claudia was never heard from again. That very day, she disappeared for good. Shit.
I am fucking dying, just saying. Next thing I knew, I was spread out on the ground. I had been in a similar state a short while ago, but this time there was a clear difference in that I was all alone. There wasn't even a hint of the warmth from before. It was just really fucking cold, I swear. Claudia died and the world the angel created vanished, leaving only me. All ragged and worthless. I clearly looked like a huge loser.
You got fucked.
そんなわけわかんねえ理屈をよ。最後に一方通行かましやがったのはそっちだろうが。一人でせいぜいと生きやがって。結局てめえの勝ち逃げかよ。クソがクソがクソが！
I lost. I failed. I didn't gain a single thing I truly desired. She'd incessantly tried to comfort me, but I wasn't the type to accept any of that shit. The victor's pity can suck it.
結局ネルクレスだったと。
He told me I wouldn't get anything. That those I actually wanted would forever elude me. I denied that ever since I received the name Kaziklu Bey. But I had no argument against that any longer. I was one who'd have things taken from me. I was tormented by such a curse. Born as an albino, I'd lost the world of day. I'd severed my link to my filthy bloodline, deluded myself into thinking I'd been reborn. But I couldn't carry out the love of destruction. They say that the first love never bears fruit, but it's not a goddamn joke. Having lost a woman I wanted that much, I could no longer claim to be a taker. My soul was lacking. My first love was taken by Claudia, and I had no way to regain it. I wouldn't have it ever again. The Wilhelm Erin bird that had fallen for her had vanished entirely from this world. I couldn't even remember exactly how I felt back then. That fact made me laugh. Man, how could I not? Since I was half a person, I couldn't even feel the pain of losing my love. All I had left was vexation and irritation. The rest of the feelings I might have had vanished with Claudia. So I laughed at my immaturity and wretchedness, ridiculed and scorned them before turning them into anger. It was to fill the parts I had lost. Also, I could walk my all-devouring eternal hegemony. Like fuck, I'd cry. I never cried once in my entire life. Claudia said I was, but I wasn't gonna take the rambling of some idiot at face value. She was fucking blind, got it? Even the unlikely 1 in a billion chance that I did cry, that shit was gone with Claudia. Exactly. It was gone. You couldn't find it anywhere. I wasn't the type to waste time turning back and looking for whatever I dropped. All I had to do was keep on moving forward. I got no response. Whatever. We both failed to get what we wanted at the very last moment, so we'd get along just fine. She was my trophy after all. The proof of the only victor I'd ever achieved. Unlike how it was with Claudia, Helga and I would be associated for a long time. With that thought, I looked up at the dayless, nightless sky of that shitty place. If there was something above it all that I couldn't perceive, and if that was where she was, I decided to send her my final words. I acknowledged that she won, so I wasn't gonna ask for a rematch. She went and escaped. Good on her. Let her feel all fulfilled for whatever reason as she became a twinkly little star of some shit. I had to perfect myself as Methuselah so I would keep on walking forever. If she didn't like the fact that I wouldn't pay any attention to her, I wasn't the one who had to make a move. Following that whisper, I laughed again. With all that settled, though, I had to finally address reality, since I was in some deep shit. Both Helga and I were nearly dead, and we were all in the goddamn Arctic permafrost. There wasn't a single person anywhere in sight. Normally, things probably would have worked out if a polar bear or something came by, but considering my current state, I'd probably end up dead. I pondered about how to handle this shit, but then... I heard the voice of the idiot who'd reject even Lord Heidrich's orders if she didn't like them. I couldn't see it as a convenient turn of events. Beatrice only came because she was worried about Claudia. She didn't even say my name even once. If I told her what happened, she probably would have killed me. But honestly, I wasn't too averse to going wild against her. At the very least, it was way more tasteful than having to worry about dying to the fucking cold or a bear. I literally can't fucking move! I raised my voice and shouted while trying to bear the pain shooting through my body. And so...
Well, I'm royally fucked.
April 30th of the year 1945. It was the day of the fall of Berlin, and we'd gathered to prepare for the last job we'd be doing for the time being. A few months had passed since the whole thing with Ludwig and Claudia. My wounds had healed a long time ago, and the same went for everyone else. Being in good health, I was also in a good mood. What I felt was much like the excitement you'd get before a festival.
Oh, it's not those spine!
I was being completely honest. I only looked forward, so I didn't mind whatever was done. Sure, it came back to me every now and then, but that didn't mean much. Eh?
そうですね。おかげで多少のことには驚かなくなりましたよ。まあ、
一番無茶と冗談、総動員みたいな人が身近にいるからね。さて、一体これから何が起きるのやら。君はその辺どう思うマキナ？
I'm just perma-tired, I'm just saying.
知らん。特に興味もない。
I knew full well what we were supposed to do to the Reds invading Berlin.
Red? I feel like that's a term that I'm supposed to get, but I don't. The Reds invading
We'd obviously wiped them all out, but some of the details were still hidden from us. Naturally, some of us were curious. After all, this would be the finishing touch to Lord Heidrich's and Mercurius's plan, so it definitely wouldn't go as you'd expect.
ああ。だがしばし待て。じきに相当閣下が見まかられる。その時をもって状況を開始だ。ともかく貴様ら、腹を決めておくの。この作戦に失敗など許されん。
それが本当に必要なことだと納得できれば迷いません。
Honestly, looking back on it, Beatrice probably knew exactly what was about to happen. Back at Kachin, I'd seen the darkness of her heart, and she'd also heard of Claudia's end. Considering those two things, it wouldn't have been weird if she dropped the meaningless tendency to jump at and cling at the most hopeful futures. Since that moment, I'd begun calling her by that name. She was the battle maiden who'd led heroic spirits to Valhalla. That was basically synonymous with being a reaper, and using the name was my way of praising that essence of hers.
そういうことだ。では行くぞ。
Okie dokie. Ah, there's a familiar sight.
Beyond the open gates of the castle down below, despite the distance and space between the locations, there was the city of Berlin. As we looked down at the fatherland's capital, engulfed in the flames of war, we filled our hearts with our cravings and simultaneously cheered for our success.
我らに勝利を
Hi.
And that leads us to the present.
とまあそんな感じで話は終わりだ
Yeah, pretty dope shit, don't you think?
Still sinking deep into the sofa, Wilhelm nonchalantly concluded the story of his first love, which ended with Claudia's death.
後のことは特に語るまでもねえだろお前さんも知ってる通りだ終戦以降俺は世界中の鉄火場歩き回ったらベトナムだのアフガンだのよそこに大した意味はねえ単なる趣味だ戦後に生まれて戦時に青春ってやつを送ったからなそういう空気が一番馴染むし落ち着くんだよまっとも一般社会が居心地悪いってわけじゃないぜわかるだろ
ええ、今のあなたを見れば当然ね。
He fully enjoyed the pleasures of modern society. Despite being a child of war, Wilhelm didn't see urban life as a cage. Concrete jungles were within his acceptable range. He drank, gambled, went shopping, and perhaps even had friends here and there. It was part of his principles, and it was easy to describe it.
俗が好きだし、そうありたいというわけか。
The simple things. Wilhelm Ehrenberg swore an oath to live as a Methuselah, and he'd do it with his own style. Most likely because it was the secret to long life that Claudia had taught him.
とても興味深い話を聞かせてもらってありがとう。確かにあなたがどういう人かはよくわかったわ。
This is the moment where she calls the authorities.
だけど一つ、強いて気になることを聞かせてもらっていいかしら。
As Wilhelm nodded with a collected smile on his face, Dina thanked him while reclaiming the recorder on the table and turning it off. By doing so, she'd made it clear that the question would be personal, not part of the interview.
あなたは今でもクラウディアとの結末を失敗の歴史と思っているの？あなたに呪いを自覚させ、刻みつけた最初の一人だと本当に？
To him, Helga was the first woman he'd ever taken, and Claudia was the first woman who'd taken from him. It was an objective fact that the latter was the one who embodied the curse pointed out by Karl Croft. Dina asked her question because she wasn't completely sure about that, but Wilhelm's answer was quick.
どんな理屈を並べようがあら失敗で負けだろう
Now, looking at this from, Wilhelm's perspective, it kind of is. He had the one thing that he wanted taken away from him. And Mercurius was laughing in the distance at this entire display.
俺はあんな結末を望んじゃいね確かにクラウディアがああしなきゃ死んじまってたかもしれねえがなそういう問題じゃんねんだ
He didn't approve of what had happened, and that was the only result that mattered to him.
あなたのために君を思って聞こえはいいがそりゃ独りよがりっつう話だクラウディアもルートビヒも最後に一方通行かましやがった似たもん同士で組み分けするならあいつら二人に俺とヘルガって感じだろまんまと逃げられておきながらいいえあいつは俺のもんだと勘介みたいなことは言えねえよモテねえ男にも相応の意地ってもんがあるんだ
だけどそれはここに残っているあなたの考えでしょ？
Upon hearing those words, Wilhelm briefly made a dumbfounded expression which quickly became a self-derisive smile. It was as though he was praising Dina for her bravery.
今の俺が魂のかけた半分だからちゃんと分かってないだけじゃねえのかと言いたいわけだ
え、不快に思ったのなら謝るけど。
Nah, shit, girl, you got balls. That's pretty good.
別にいいぜ それで続きは
Dina's outlook wasn't all that outlandish. In fact, many of those who'd listened to his story would have responded similarly.
クラウディアが持っていったというあなたのかけらは納得していたんじゃないかしら。だったらそこについてだけは両思い。事実、あなたは彼女の死に臨んだ当時のことをちゃんと記憶できていない。話の中でもそこについてだけはかなり曖昧だったでしょ。ヘルガを解き放ってから以降、ぷつりと流れが途切れていた。次に一人きりとなって目が覚めるシーンまで、なんだかダイジェストみたいな感じだったわ。
He'd only said what he'd been told back then, what he'd said himself, and then the result. That simplicity made it lack subjectivity. The Wilhelm that was present wasn't a part of that scene. Or to put it another way, the Wilhelm that was a part of the scene wasn't present.
それこそ証じゃないかと私は思う。だから、あなたは負けたんじゃなく。
Dina assumed that they'd merely split their roles.
初恋を抱いたビルヘルム・エーレンブルグは、クラウディアと相思相愛を結実させて一つになった。でも、それは生きながらに達することができない状況だったから。
そこは俺が任された。
ええ。だって、あなたは今も生きてる。そしてこれからも生きようとしている。
Despite considering the matter with Claudia a great failure and defeat, he was completely forward-thinking. Still, sure, it irritated him, and the curse was still there, but he wasn't the least bit rotten in that regard. He intended to live on. He lived and dreamed of the possibilities that awaited beyond.
本当はジャガイモを待ってるんじゃない？あなたは否定するんでしょうけど。
One who lived long, which obviously dropped something along the way, but he could always find more things to pick up. Wilhelm's philosophy was to head for completion by moving forward, never stopping or backing away.
ちょっと感傷的に過ぎるかしら。
そうだな。女の理屈だよ。悪いがうなずいてはやれねえな。言ったと思うが、俺はそんなの願わないし夢見ねえ。ただ貪欲だからな。向こうの方から転がってくるんならそりゃ拾うだろって言ってるだけだよ。
主導権ね。
ああ、大事なことだぜ。
He formed an affable smile, and Dina responded in kind. In her mind, those things were the same, but the capacity to acknowledge that was probably taken away by the other Wilhelm.
不死身になりたい。あなたは今もメトシェラを目指しているのね。私なんかからすると雲をつかむような話だけど、叶うと思う？
当然だ。
His reply came fast. He didn't doubt it whatsoever and was still intent on acquiring the glory.
とはいえ呪いのこともあるんですね。今のままじゃ例のごとくあと一歩で届かないかもしれねえ。だから順序としてはそっちが先だな。まずはこのふざけた業を欲しいもんから逃げられるって俺のキャラをどうにかしなきゃいけねえんだよ。ああ、実際いろいろやってきたんだがことごとく失敗してる。そこでだな、ちょっと聞いてみたいんだが。
At that moment, a certain something vanished from him. Though he still smiled and looked relaxed, it felt like what little warmth he exuded turned to an icy chill. Up until that moment, he was akin to a wild beast, albeit scary. He was still amiable, and it wasn't impossible to understand him. Now, however, he was more like a reptile or a shark. Dina felt something unnatural, and before she knew it, she had started sweating profusely.
お前さん、一体どこの回しもんだ。前に CIA の脱走兵から狙われたことがあるんだが、そっちつながりの人間かい。何にしろ、絶対仇じゃねえわな。
Oh my.
言ったと思うが、俺は鼻が利くんだぜ。
Suddenly, Dina, without any hesitation, clicked a button on the recorder, or rather, the portable terminal that looked like one.
It created a burst of invisible lightning, pain great enough to kill a common human sparked within Wilhelm. That made him collapse. Dina looked down at him and stood up, bearing an expression completely unlike the one before. Just as Wilhelm had surmised, it wasn't that of a common nobody. Oh. Oh. This is an interesting sort of, twist. I honestly expected that, he'd kill her immediately. But this is an interesting twist I wasn't expecting. Nice. She'd press the button again, making Wilhelm silently convulse once more. This was caused by the thing she'd spiked his kiss in the dark with. A clear sign that such kisses were sweet yet dangerous. What she'd made him drink were basically nanomachines. Nanomachines, son! Though obviously they were quite unlike normal ones. They spread throughout all the capillaries in the body, and when the button was pressed, they released an immense pain caused by a curse. Yeah, that ain't fucked up. With a sweet smile on her face, Dina walked toward the exit, then momentarily turned around. Plot twist. What if he spiked his kiss, Okay. Here's my idea. What if he spiked the kiss in the dark that she drank with some of his blood? She's probably not going to be able to make out of this alive. Just saying. In Japan, I mean. She whispered to herself as she left the Borges house. Left behind, Wilhelm was still convulsing, unable to stand up.
So
10 minutes later, Dina was driving a Ford over the Brooklyn Bridge, she reported to her superior. Just as she'd said, the primary goal was the death of Wilhelm Ehrenberg, but even without that, she gained a lot from him and came out alive. Even if it hadn't all gone according to plan, the mission was a definite success. She'd revealed one of their tricks, so he'd probably be more cautious from now on, but he wasn't the type of man to reveal his blunder to others. From the interview, she knew that he was one who wouldn't let go of his fixations, even if his life was in danger. Off topic, anytime I see the name Eileen, I can't stop thinking about Eileen from Bloodborne. Dina felt a cold sweat run down her back. To her and to those above her, the transmutation of gold was something that had to be stopped at all costs. It would mean the return of Reinhard Heydrich, the second coming of the leader of the Obsidian Table, who disappeared somewhere alongside 3 of his subordinates during the fall of Berlin. They didn't actually know what his return implied. However, it was certain that the city to be used as the altar of the ritual would be destroyed, and the country that would be the stage, Japan, would be crushed by 13 madmen with mystic powers, and surely that would only be the beginning of their problems. If one modern, developed country was turned upside down, the influence it would have on everyone else would be immeasurable. It was even possible that it could spark World War III, and that was no joke. Was that their goal, though? Did they want a third war they could fight and win to make up for the disgrace in the previous 2? Their purpose was one of the most contested subjects regarding the Obsidian Table. Though many would claim that the previous assumption was too foolish and didn't match the effort involved, it was still one of the more realistic options. The more preposterous ideas include the assumption that their return would end the world. Not in the same way as a nuclear war, however, but in a metaphysical, spiritual manner like the Last Judgment. They claimed that the Obsidian Table weren't just a bunch of terrorists. but messengers blowing the horn of demise, and Reinhard Heydrich was the fearful High King they called for. Yep. Though it all sounded overly cultish, Dina couldn't laugh it off. At the very least, she was fully aware that Wilhelm believed in that very future.
現状確かなのは彼が政治的イデオロギーを持つような手合いでないということです。そこについてはヴィルヘルム・エーレンブルグだけが特殊である可能性も捨てきれませんが、私の個人的感想ではノー。ひどく俗な、そしてそうあることに意義を見出す者たちです。彼らが求めているのは一種陳腐とさえ言える形の現世利益。
World domination? Honor for their country? They didn't even lend those things an ear. Sure, those two were worldly things as well, but the dream of the war demons was much simpler, giving it great permanence. Indeed, it was...
不死です、長官。死なないものになることで果てなく戦い続けること。つまり黄金連星とは不死身になるための儀式なのだと理解しました。
Wilhelm's wish was to become Methuselah, after all. He deemed the gold as undying, and sought to gain a soul of strife that would advance forward for all eternity. As Dina's superior at the other side of the call became speechless, she once again thought over the talk with Wilhelm. Though the man who had known who she was, it was hard to imagine that he'd spoken only lies. He wasn't the type of man who would do such a thing. Thus, she believed that everything regarding Claudia was true, although the vampire was scum who had to die. He was also a man loved by an angel. That made Dina feel somewhat conflicted. Claudia had wished for Wilhelm to live on, and that prayer of hers would soon be trampled. She whispered that in a way her superior wouldn't hear. Still, there was no helping it. That man had killed far too many, and given immortality, he would kill many more. Considering all that, there really was no room for compassion. His ideal had to be crushed, even if it came at the cost of desecrating Claudia's death. After all, siding with only her on this matter would in itself be equal to desecrating the countless people who tragically died by Wilhelm's hand. That was all there was to it. In this society, it was principle, common sense, that you couldn't look at things one-sidedly. But if there was still room for dreams, then there was one way through which Claudia's wish could live on. Her sentimentality made her form a wry grin. But then... Her superior's voice brought Dina back to reality, making her hastily recompose herself.
申し訳ありません。それで今後の方針はどうなるのでしょうか。シャンバラへ投入される部隊にまだ空きがあるのでしたら、私も志願したいのですが。
まあ、それなら心配いらんよ。その必要はない。
Oh? Did he mean that he'd already requested that she be sent to the site, or was it the opposite of that? His words could be interpreted both ways, and even neither of them. Nah, you're probably gonna get killed. There was enough to puzzle her, and the words she heard next made her doubt her ears. The moment she realized what was happening, it was already too late. Fucking called it! On that part, at least. The Ford she was driving exploded, and a flower of fire bloomed in the night. Unable to do anything, Dina was caught up in it and instantly burned to a crisp. The sudden event caused a great disturbance on the Brooklyn Bridge and made several other cars crash. The screams and smoke made the place seem like a battlefield. Yet a man that had just arrived seemed thoroughly unimpressed and unamused.
For fuck's sake, man.
Wilhelm had chased after Dina, ready to catch her, but only found her in this situation.
やっぱ慣れねえ小芝居しないでさっさとやっときゃよかったのかな。しかしそれじゃつまんねえしな。
Yeah, I guess it would have been a little boring. Dina's attack back at the bar didn't have much of an effect.
Sure, it was nothing, but it definitely wasn't enough to make him faint. Despite that, he decided to play along, most likely because he just wanted to test her. The fact that she'd interacted with him while having a means of opposing him made Dina a fine woman in his eyes, a soul worth consuming. For better or for worse, passing that first checkpoint of his made Wilhelm like her. Because of that, he chose her to be the target of his personalized expression of affection. The heroine in a dramatic car chase. The result of that was rather evident. She was taken away before he was done with her. Perhaps this was fated the moment he took a liking to her. Anything the vampire wanted to take would always be stolen by something else. It was a curse they had yet to be rid of.
これから祭りが始まるってのにマジで幸先が悪いったらありゃしねえ。
I know, man. They keep ruining all your fun.
済んじまったもんはしょうがねえよな。
Moving forward. Nowhere else but straight ahead. That was how Wilhelm Ehrenberg lived.
敵は取ってやるぜ、ディーナ。生きがけのダチンだ。
He stood before the burning fort and breathed through his nose, taking in a scent that only he could understand and using it to find his target. The paramour had taken a fine woman away from him, so there was no reason to stomach his life.
皆殺しだ。
The eyes glittering behind the sunglasses were burning with a crimson rose-like color. He grew stakes all over his body and dashed away with beastly speed. It was another night where the nocturnal dark phoenix flew and bathed in blood as he danced a ferocious, maddened dance.
行くぞヘルダー。
そうねビル、いつも一緒よ。愛してるわ。
The day the world would end was drawing ever closer, but no matter what future awaited him, he would never stop. For he was Methuselah, an undying entity who would shine for all eternity. And that was Dies Irae interview with Kaziklu Bey. Oh, that was enjoyable. Granted, it was only like maybe 1/10 the length of Amantes Amentes. That's fine because, to be fair, this is basically just a bit of a side story involving arguably one of the more enjoyable villains from the main story. Like, well, we didn't really get much with Rotospine. But then again, I understand he's probably one of the hardest characters to write for just because of how fucking good he is. But aside from Eleanor, Wilhelm was arguably one of the characters that I feel definitely... I'd say he definitely deserved having like a side story written about him. Which really makes me regret that I don't get to read a story about Eleanor. That sucks. Or actually just fucking any of them, really. Granted, I guess you could consider we got a story about Beatrice and... Kai, sorry. God damn it. We at least got a story about them, sort of? But it wasn't an entire story dedicated directly to them. You know what I mean? I gotta say, this experience was actually quite good. This is actually pretty damn good. Being able to see early Kaziklu Bey and seeing, yeah, I noticed that that Claudia certainly did have one hell of an effect on him. I liked it. It was actually really damn good. It's interesting because usually whenever you hear about side stories of certain main stories, it's usually surrounding like one of the good guys or someone like that. You rarely ever get to see a side story dedicated to a villain, and not just any villain, arguably one of the most scumbaggiest assholes of the villainous side. And it makes you actually enjoy his story. Which, you know what? Good on you, writer for Dies Irae. Good on you. And I feel bad that I always have trouble remembering your name, but I hate myself for not being able to remember. Okay, arguably the art in this one was utterly fantastic. Not saying that the original Dies Irae didn't have fantastic art, because good lord, that was just thumbnail central. But this one, it seemed like it kind of kicked it up a notch, like having significantly more, and most of it obviously being centered around our favorite albino vampire. The introduction of Claudia itself was interesting. Claudia's a bit of a mixed bag for me. Like, it took me a little bit to kind of get to understand her mindset. But overall, it was pretty good. I mean, she was messed up in her own way. I mean, considering, well, she fell in love with Kaziklu Bey. Which, I don't know. Oh, there's more. After a slumber that lasted less than a brief moment, the man woke up and slowly blinked. Mercurius? Though it was exceedingly rare for him to sleep, the content of the dream still meant little to him. It was the story of a certain grain of stardust that was born in the past, which had long since vanished. With the whole of his universe being nigh infinite, the entity was equal to trash. And he didn't even remember its name. However, he wondered why he even had such a dream. He would soon be granted the death he yearned for and arrive at a conclusion he desired, so why? This is the sunset land that Maria was in. Suddenly, a rosary appeared in one of his palms. He threw a glance at it before nonchalantly releasing it on the twilight beach. With that, the man turned to the sign and walked away. Unknown to all, the rosary he left would be buried in this vast beach, and continued chanting of only a single light.
たとえどんなに立場が違っても、私たちが目指しているものはきっと同じ。良きところに行きたい。そうなのでしょ?
Ah, good. Oh! Back to the main menu, and we finally got this unlocked. Show me. Ooh, CG Gallery, Music Appreciation, Movie Gallery. Subarashi. How many pages is this? Wow. I didn't realize we had so many. But then again, this is Irae. It's something I should have expected by this point. Seriously, for real though, that is goddamn end of days shit right there. Oh, that's wicked. But yes, I'll say it again. I really, you know what? Let's get some good old music playing in here. What do we got here? Ooh. This is the song that I was thinking of. I almost slurred all my words together. Or one of them at least. Yes. Hell, whenever I might get on to work with my, Really, we didn't have that much music in here, did we? Huh. Well, whenever I get to work on my, Zilut, I might use this. Possibly. I don't know. I'll have Setsun and some of the others of the Irae fandom help me out with that. By the way, the artwork is coming along quite well. I can't really show it because I really just want to show it off in its entirety whenever I'm actually done with it. But it's probably going to be much bigger production value than my Bria. Or at least I'll try to make it that way. I'm still kind of getting better with editing, but we'll see about that. I lost my train of thought on this. But, yes. For a short story revolving around probably one of my favorite villains from Irae in general, this was actually pretty damn good. It's certainly not 95 episodes, which, good lord, if this was 95 episodes, we would be at this for about 2 years, because if I did this only one episode a week, we would be in some serious trouble. But, overall, this was just... Irae is still up there, right up next to Umineko, and how much I love the universe that it kind of gives me. And also just because of how utterly conflicted it makes my feelings. Like, I'm slightly rooting for these god-awful people, these monsters. It makes you root for them. And I don't know why I like that so much. But yes, I know that there are other entries in this. There was the the one that's got the 3 Ks in the name. That really confused me with that one comment there. That really just threw me off on that. I know that there's that one, but it hasn't been translated yet, apparently. As tempting as it is for me to look into that, I really want to wait until it is translated. I believe in a miracle that will be translated, and whenever it is translated, we might tackle it. Just so you know. So, hopefully we'll be able to keep Dies Irae a thing on this channel, sort of, kind of like we do with Echo and stuff like that. But I will sort of, kind of treat this as a sort of end to a series. I'm glad I got into Dies Irae. It was one hell of a glorious ride. And it was a very golden experience for me. So, to all of you who joined me on this, to all of you who stuck with me for as long as you did, thank you all very much. Thank you all so much. And I will see all of you guys in the next video.